Peace, love, and light, everyone. My name is Aaliyah Oliver. I'm a Programs and Media Associate at the Caribbean Cultural Center African Diaspora Institute. We are an arts, culture, education, and media organization that advances cultural equity and racial and social justice for African descendant communities. On behalf of the center, I want to welcome all of you to our first episode of Sankofa Talks, a series of intergenerational talks between artists, activists, and educators of the African diaspora. Translated from the Twi language of the Akan people of Ghana, West Africa, Sankofa means to go back and get it. And it speaks to the importance of gathering up those lessons from our past and using them in the creation of our future. So for Black August, where we honor the work of our revolutionaries and educate ourselves on the histories of our resistance as a people, these Sankofa Talks will highlight the culture bearers that continue in the work of our ancestors and agitate for our liberation as a people in all spheres of access, identity, and belonging. And in order to keep things interesting, CCCADI has selected participants that have never before met. And so not only is this the first time that they're getting to know one another, but CCCADI has also crafted questions for them to answer and to get to know one another. Do not forget to leave your comments and questions from wherever you are watching tonight's Sankofa Talk, because the participants will be responding during the audience Q&A portion. So without further ado, enjoy tonight's Sankofa Talk, Black Liberation in the Classroom.
Hi, Michael.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am fine. I'm just fine. It's nice to meet you virtually. We literally just met each other, like 5 minutes ago?
Yeah. And we're already kind of aligned with these colors, this color scheme we got going on.
Yeah.
So we're ready. We're pretty much ready.
We're ready. Introductions. Shall I go first?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm going to introduce everyone to my new friend, Akiea. Akiea is a Black, queer, abolitionist, revolutionary, liberator, activist, and educator. He is the founder of Woke Kindergarten, which is not a school, but a movement and a paradigm shift in thinking. And I have been looking forward to this all week. So join me in welcoming Akiea to this virtual space.
That was a really dope introduction. I don't know if I can follow that. It was a really dope introduction. I appreciate that. I think the other part that I would add is that one big aspect of my identity is also being a creator, even within education. And so much of my life outside of typical educational spaces is creating. And so I find myself straying so much from business aspects of things because I just want to create, in any possible way. So thank you for that. That was lovely. Michael Wiggins, everybody, is an OG arts administrator, teaching artist, educator. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, so maybe I won't.
Curse all you want.
I was going to say pretty much a badass in the game. You have pretty much been everywhere. Right now, you're the director of engagement and education for Little Island, which I just discovered, which is it seems like an amazing place that I would want to explore and be with children, especially. Was really hyped to discover that, Michael was also previously director of education at Baltimore Center Stage. Hype about that because I'm from Maryland. So getting it right. So hearing, I was like, okay, be more, stand up. You also were formerly at Urban Arts Partnership, the Public Theater, New Victory Theater, all of these phenomenal places you have been. And that just tells me that so much of your soul is to create and to be and to innovate. And so getting to know you through your bio was really dope. But I think my favorite thing that I learned is that you wrote a book and I bought it. So I did. You wrote a book, and I started reading it because I've known so many teaching artists, and I know a lot of the teaching artists that you've been in community with, and I just was reading, and I was like, this is it. This is the way. So yes, Michael Wiggins, everybody.
So Oh, wow.
Icebreakers.
They can't see, but can they see that it says Icebreakers? Anyway, now I know it's Icebreakers. Okay. Here we go.
Favorite way to decompress?
Name your favorite way to decompress.
So before everything shut down due to COVID-19, one of my favorite things to do, besides like scroll Tumblr for like queer stuff, like really honestly, that's one way that I've just to calm my anxiety initially. I feel like Tumblr is where all the sane people go. And I could talk about all the other social media sites, but there's so many, I don't know, there's just so much to learn and understand and like be in community with other people on Tumblr who are like having conversations. I think people often forget about that platform, but when we could actually go do things and it was safe, one of my favorite things was to find my favorite indie film cinema or really any film cinema and just go watch movies by myself. And I could spend an entire day watching film in a movie theater, a whole day. Yes. And I love indie films, yes. Especially. I love A24 films. So that's what I love to do, even while I'm at home. I just like to find a good film. Sometimes I'll just lose myself at the Marvel universe if I just need to get away and escape, because I'm really an escapist at heart. So I love to just immerse myself in cinema. What about you?
You know, I'm prone to fall into all the distractions that are available on social media, and entertainment, you know, of all forms. But to decompress, I think I begin with the body. I like to exercise a lot. Sometimes I go a little overboard, but I need to do that every day. And yoga is really my go-to. I've been, you know, practicing for a long time. I'm still terrible at it. They keep telling you every time you go, you know, even iron will bend if you heat it up, but it still hurts the same as it did 30 years ago, but I do it anyway.
I love that. I just recently decided that I needed to try yoga. I had like a health scare and I couldn't run. And so everybody in my life has just always said, yo, Key, try yoga. And I'm just like, same thing. I just keep telling myself I'm not going to be good at it, or it's not for me. You know, like not that it's not for me, but it has never, it felt like it wasn't presented in a way that was for me, even though I know that's not true. So I really want to get.
How is it not true? I mean, if that's what you're feeling, that's what that is true. I think that I resonate with, you know, yoga spaces are just like any other spaces in America, you know, so.
Facts. Facts. Okay, Michael, share one thing that reminds you of where you're from.
And so the question of where I'm from is an interesting one in the context of being, you know, Black in America. Like, I don't really know where all my ancestors are from. I know my mother is from North Carolina. My father is from Virginia. They're from a different time and a different place. I think something that reminds me of where I'm from would be like doo-wop music. My father loves doo-wop music, and when I hear that, wherever that kind of music is, wherever harmonies are in music, and people are singing, you know, group of people, 3 or 4 people singing in that style, I'm transported home, or where I'm from. I think that is where I'm from. I'm from my mother and my father. That's where I'm from.
I love that. First of all, I love that answer, and it's crazy because when we first met, like, you know, 20 minutes ago, I felt like, okay, we've connected in some way, and it's so interesting. So you mentioned North Carolina and Virginia. I went to college in North Carolina, and I went to Chapel Hill, and my whole father's side of the family is from Newport News, Virginia. And so like I too, very similarly, have so, I guess I'm really disconnected from my roots as well. And I think my family is too, in that they just feel like they're just from Virginia and nothing else. And then my mother's side of the family is from primarily from like a small town in Pennsylvania, right outside of Pittsburgh. But I was born and raised in Montgomery County, Maryland. And
I know where
so,
that is.
yeah, listen, you were in Baltimore, so you got to know. I think what reminds me of Maryland the most is probably just like very similarly to you, it's music. So I think a lot about go-go music. Anytime I hear go-go music or like Baltimore House, I'm immediately transported home, specifically go-go music, because it's just like, yeah, listen, growing up, and, and I feel like I didn't really appreciate it when I was younger, when my mom used to bump it all the time and bump all the old school go-go. And, still to this day, still bumping the old school go-go. But it just reminds me, I was reminded so much of when DC really showed up and showed out, when it wasn't too long ago when they were protesting gentrification. I had a whole go-go in the streets, and I just thought to myself, that's the energy I miss often being in New York. It's like I really miss that DMV energy, but that's what reminds me of home. All right, here we go.
Wow.
It's deep. Who wants to start? Deep. You want to start? You want me to start?
Breathe in and breathe out. What does Black liberation in the classroom look like? Well, I mean, what does it mean? I think that's the first one for me. Figuring out what does Black liberation mean? I thought long and hard about it. There's no Black liberation in the classroom. Like it's Black liberation is in the mind. I mean, I think liberation of all forms is in the mind, is in the body, in the mind. It's an individual thing. I mean, you can go back and look at testimony of people who have been imprisoned, and you look at people who are in contexts that are overtly and explicitly terrible, in which they had no physical freedom, and yet they are free. And I am free, regardless of the context. The idea that I can do this, I can contradict myself because I feel like it. I can contradict myself. The struggle for Black liberation is real, but the idea that I need to be liberated is not real. I am me being free as nobody's business but my own. I am free because I say so, and because I'm doing that work to make myself free.
I'm sitting with that for a second, because that's deep. When I first saw this question, my immediate, my most reactive response to it is that it pragmatically couldn't exist in a classroom, because I have this, in terms of how I feel like this school system itself is oppressive and just inherently racist and just inherently oppressive. And so that's where my mind first goes. And then, also hearing you talk, I agree with you that if I'm thinking about children in classrooms, if I'm thinking about what liberation looks like there, right? And it starts in the mind and in the heart and in the body, then I'm looking at kids who are actively resisting the structures in which they are confined to. So I'm looking at the kids that get sent out of class. To me, that looks like, those kids, the ones that are constantly quote unquote trouble, the ones that refuse to accept that reality and refuse to accept their circumstances. To me, that looks like liberation in an actual classroom, right? Because Absolutely. I feel like so much of what I'm, actively trying to work towards is this idea of the world essentially is where we learn and how we learn and all of these things. But I'm also a realist in that I know this system, now post-COVID, it's looking a little bit different, but prior to this, right, our kids were in these places and spaces that were never made for them, right? They were never made, with Black liberation in mind. And so when I think of liberation in the classroom, it's the babies that stand up for themselves. It's the ones that love themselves so much that when something feels off or doesn't feel good, they've been reared in a way to stand up for themselves and to stand up for one another. And I think as educators in these particular spaces, our kind of jobs and what it looks like for us is to ensure that our babies love themselves so much that when that happens, they're like, hold up, this doesn't feel right, you know? Yeah. So yeah, I love that question because I feel like it's so layered. And my first initial response was like, nah, I can't exist in a classroom. And then here you go. So I appreciate that perspective.
No, I'm not in favor of thinking that we can tweak things around the edges and make changes in a system, in a culture that in itself is sick. You can't have a healthy. You're not gonna have anything healthy unless we address the real problems, which are the idea that it's a form of ignorance. The Buddha would talk about, like in the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism, the idea that we suffer, right? That's just truth. And so the world is messed up and our relationship to it is going to be painful. And the second thing is that is so because we're attached. We think that, we want to hold on to all the good things. And then we don't understand that everything is impermanent anyway, right? Everything shifts all the time. And, the third thing is to realize, like, because of that impermanence, there is a way forward. And then the answer to that, like escape is possible. Freedom is possible. Freedom from all of that is possible. And it comes through like having a right understanding of what the universe is and really investigating that question of like who you are. And so, for me, Black liberation in the classroom it would come from educating children in a way that they saw themselves. My mother used to talk about this, the idea that you are in this culture, but you are not of it. And I think there is a certain form of separatism individual separatism that has to occur if you want to be free. Like you can't really be that deeply interested in popular culture and feel validated by popular culture or into all these things. I could name lots of different things, name anything that you have to buy. You can't be into that stuff and be free. You can't think that that's going to make you feel a certain way or change your reality if you get it, and if you can buy and want to be free. So like nobody who participates in this culture in a full way who's like, I really buy that. Like I really dig the American dream, or I buy that. Like anybody who buys that is never going to be free because it's not made to make you free. It's made to enslave you. So the work it can be delivered by anybody who is, woke. I love this thing woke because it's so much like woke is what you want to be. A woke person is in nirvana.
That's deep. That's really deep. Ooh, fighting for. Ooh, this is a deep question. 3 things.
3?
Name 3 things you are fighting for in your fight for Black liberation in the classroom. Well, should I start? Should
Please.
I start with Michael? Okay.
I'm still writing.
Right. Listen, gotta take some notes. Listen. I think one of the biggest things is I really just want like death to constructs and binaries. I really want kids to feel loved and affirmed in who they are completely, who they are, like every fiber of their beings. I get really tired of gendered language in classrooms and gendered play and all of these different things that just like are not even our own thoughts. I really want people to expel all of these thoughts that aren't ours. Like they're not our thoughts. It's such a colonial thing to think within this idea that there are these binaries and constructs that exist that we should continue to buy into. And so part of my work now is I don't think when I was in the classroom, I was always navigating this space on like of how to speak to my own gender identity. And I only recently, within the last couple of years, having left the system, really started to understand who I am at my core. And so while I was in the classroom, I found myself kind of based on, families I might have to engage with. I was worried that some families might take their kids out of my class if they knew certain things about me. Right. And so at the time, I really felt restricted in some ways. So I would have some families who knew, all about who I am. And I didn't even feel like I feel like we're so many different iterations of self throughout our lifetimes anyway, that at that time, I didn't feel like I really knew deeply who I am. And so now it's just like being who I am in my fullest self and understanding like that in itself is an act of resistance. And that in itself is liberating, like to sit here and be able to name like I'm a non-binary, like, trans queer person. To me, I want kids to be able to do that and feel love doing it, because we know that our babies do this, right? And it's the reactions to them that often are super off-putting and violent. So that's my first thing. I really just want them to be able to be themselves to the point where everybody gags, like, can't nobody and everybody and I don't know. It's just, that's such a beautiful thing, because kids are like that anyway. And we, as adults, we strip them of that.
Yes.
I also think for me, I really want to see like empathy for all living beings. I really want to get back to this idea of interconnectedness and what it means to be connected with nature and one another and animals and all of these things. And the idea that like human supremacy exists is like something that I'm really anti this idea of like human supremacy in any way, right? And so I think that type of empathy that kids naturally inhabit, I want that to be kind of a guiding force. And I think that's what it is. It has to be a guiding force in liberation. And the third thing, also like that's also means death to like prison industrial complex, death to classism, capitalism. But also the third thing is fighting for a full future. And like what I mean by that is like us really living in this, like not in a survivalist way anymore. I want us to be able to live in ways where we can envision ourselves thriving and taste it, right? And smell it and touch it and be in it. Like that's really what I want. I know I'm tired of surviving. So I know that everybody else is too. And we operate in such present moments because we often have to. And I'm really just tired of that, because liberation is really being able to freedom dream present futures that, are possible, that they don't want us to have. And so that, I think those are my three things.
I wish I could sit with it for a little while before I had to engage in the conversation. I just really want to just take in everything that you said without getting sentimental. Because it does it does move me emotionally, what you have expressed. As a Black queer man in America who is, in his 50s, like that really, the idea of being accepted for self resonates with me in such a particular way. There's this phenomenon, and I think I notice it more and more as I grow older, of a shock with myself, a shock, a stunned silence when I realize some of the stuff that I have put up with. And some of the stuff that I have perpetrated because I'm a member of society, as a fully functioning member of society, I've enforced its rules, its unspoken rules. I have done that even though I know that I have been wounded because there was no one to protect me and my queer identity growing up in a specific way, right? And there was no validation for my full self. And so what is really exciting for me, as apparently in this conversation I'm the old one, which is hilarious because I don't know how it happened. It happens by degrees, minute by minute, breath by breath. But I welcome it. It excites me so much, the amount of love, like the true love that is coming out of the younger activists, the younger generation. This idea that no, we should not have to put up with this stuff, this crap. Whereas for me, there's so many things that I just thought that was there was no way to fight it. Not that I wasn't fighting, because I absolutely wasn't, had been, involved in activist movements, et cetera, but there are small things. And so I'm with you. I sign on to your mission. And I add some things of my own. I feel like children have the right to self-determination. It's inconvenient, but it's true. It's like when I'm teaching and a child is bored and they want to leave, that's my fault. I mean, I wasn't entertaining enough. It's partly my fault. Whatever it is, it's my responsibility to do something that to not to coerce them, but to create an environment that they want to stay in, to like analyze the situation, to diagnose the situation, and actually do something where they're like, you know what? I choose to be here. I like being here. And if it's not happening, they have a right to leave. And I think adults feel like, coercion is the way to go, but coercion is violence. And so the thing I'm fighting for in terms of liberating the classroom is to like identify what violence actually is. Violence is not just me hitting you upside the head. Violence is shutting me down, misgendering me, making homophobic references. Violence is saying we are all going to be kings and queens. There's no way we can all be kings and queens, because I'm not stupid and I know that you can only have, a ruler, or you can't have king. Also, what if I want to be, anyway, all of that kind of stuff. There's so many good impulses that we have in terms of loving our community and Afrocentrism, all that stuff, that are actually toxic. And we know that. So like confronting that idea, the fact that children should be silent, all that kind, right? They should be told what to do, all that kind of stuff. We have to let that go if we want to embrace love. And that's like, people are look at you like you're out of your mind. What do you mean a 3-year-old has the right to self-determination? Well, they do, in fact. Anything else is violent. And growing up, there's this really interesting thing where, as a Black person in America, I do notice, I put it in with some of the things I was talking about, like we've accepted that. I accepted certain things that would not be acceptable today. So the things that you're talking about are growth space for me, right? I didn't know that. Y'all told me that. You told me that kind of world was possible. I didn't even know it. And I'm following you for all of that. I think patriarchy has to go. I benefit from it because I'm a dude, but patriarchy is the problem. It's toxic. Women, everybody enforces patriarchy, and it's a myth. It's a myth that obliterated like real things. Like, I mean, look at the Greek myths. The gods sprung from his head. I mean, really, seriously, is that a creation myth? Like, we know how these things happen already. Like, so why are you? Right. I mean, it's deep in our culture, the idea of patriarchy. Even I was talking today with a colleague, the idea that, the pockets if I were to wear what a woman in this culture would wear, people would laugh at me immediately, even though drag is really accepted now, because already that a woman has less power. So why would you want to do that? And it goes to my last one, which is, the idea of the fact that we already know how to fix it. We're tied to things that are toxic and bad for us as individuals and as a culture, because some of them feel good and we're not ready to let it go. And because it gives certain people better outcomes, right? So like if I can access the power of patriarchy, I'm gonna have a better outcome. And while letting that go is scary, right? The idea of letting that go. I think people don't know that our schools are as desegregated now as they were when I was born, as segregated now as they were when I was born. I think people think that job is like lots of things. And, we think we did it, check the box, and we're on our way. But, I have been in New York City public schools, off and on, not so much anymore, but I don't remember seeing a lot of diversity in Title I schools. I saw a lot of Black and brown children, and that was it. And that continues. Nevertheless, a liberal culture continues to think, very good people, very caring people are like, I didn't know that. And they do nothing to address it. So I think true desegregation, or at least facing the facts, we should have a clock that says, still segregated. Yes.
Right. And segregated without resources, right? Because sometimes what I grapple with is I'm not really averse to Black and brown folks being together and learning together. right? I'm good with that. It's when there are just like all white teachers in those schools and just like all white leadership in those schools and just like no money. And if there is money, where is it going? It's going to like the CEOs of the school. There are CEOs of schools. And so that's to me, because, you know, people say that like, oh, you know, we need to work on, you know, integration, which I feel like I grew up in schools that were actually integrated, because Montgomery County Public Schools has some of the most diverse cities in the nation. And so I grew up in a bubble. Like, not only was it diverse, but it was a rich county. It is a wealthy county, one of the wealthiest counties in the nation. And so even when you're struggling, like my mother was on welfare and I didn't know it. When I came to New York, like I knew it, right? Like that type of idea, like classism is so deeply embedded into this that like I grew up knowing every single type of person on earth. You could tell me that I knew everybody. I grew up with every type of person. And so when I, you know, ventured to New York, I was actually shocked at what I saw. And that's where my growth, I was radicalized by being in New York schools in particular. That's what radicalized me. It wasn't my upbringing, because how can you be radicalized in Montgomery County? I just feel like you can't. Like you just grow up in a little bubble of privilege where you're told you work hard and, you know, whatever. And that's something that I've, you know, had to actively work to dismantle. But, you know, I agree with you. I think I battle patriarchy every day. And I think part of this liberatory process is being able to pinpoint those moments that are like, oh my God, like this is violent. Like I might not be perpetuating it actively right now, but the thought itself is violent, right? The thought is what's going to eventually determine my behavior. It's going to manifest as something. And so if I can, you know, check it in the moment and figure out what I need to do. You know, a lot of people forget that this liberatory work is self-work, right? Like you were saying before, it is deeply self-work. And so if I'm not there, and if I'm not actively working to get there, I can't expect nobody else to be. And I'm not responsible for anybody else, but I know that my decisions and the way that I move about the world, and if I'm constantly self-reflecting and introspecting and doing my deep work, I need to heal. I need to heal, or I'm gonna hurt everybody else. I'm gonna keep hurting. So I'm 100% with you on that. I think we answered the hell out of this question, by the way. That's Ooh. It's a deep one. What advice do you have for my generation?
I have no advice for your generation.
Please, come on.
People don't take advice anyway, from my experience, and it only makes the advice giver feel good. I'm really good at giving advice, so it feeds my ego. I'm like, oh, I'm so smart. I'm gonna give somebody some advice. I do it all the time, and then I'm like, what was that really about? Did that advice giving come out of a real space of caring? Or like, examine your ego. Like, did it feel good? Do you feel smart? All that stuff. Yes, that's what it's for. That's why people give advice. That's what I think. It's not not a real thing. I mean, support. I can give you some support.
Yeah, please do.
I can share some things with you.
Some wisdom.
Share some stuff. Well, I can share wisdom, which basically would be like showing you my scars. I got this one because I didn't, right? And I got that one. I could do that. And maybe you could learn from that. But I would rather take advice from you and like a reminder.
Okay. So you are actually my parents' generation. My father was born in 65. My mom was born in 69. And I am deeply hurt by both of them. It makes me emotional to think about, because I try not to, I believe in this idea of having empathy for people and still holding them accountable, because accountability is love, right? And so in order to do that, I try to extend grace, and at the same time, acknowledge, I need my folks to acknowledge how they've hurt me. And so one of the things that resonated with me, I went to Fotografiska, the museum. I went there in Stockholm once, and then was hyped to see that when they opened in New York. So before COVID shut down, Tawny Chapman had an exhibit there, Inheritance, and there was a tagline, and the tagline was something like, our children inherit what we don't resolve. And so my kind of what I would say, I guess, is to Gen X is to please heal yourselves. Because that trauma, as we know, right? We know with the way that epigenetics works, we know like that our DNA is literally changed by our experiences, and vice versa. And so I often feel so much heaviness in my body, like really super, super hyper empathic. I'm very like this all the time. And I feel so much ancestral energy in me all the time that I actively had to start I started doing my ancestry as a form of therapy. Because I felt really disconnected from my folks. Very small nuclear family, did not grow up with my father, a lot of pain around all of this. And so my biggest thing is like, I really need Gen X I know Gen X is hurting because your parents were like boomers in that generation. It couldn't have been easy. It couldn't have been easy to grow up within such a constricted way. Beautiful, so much beauty in that, because I feel like 60s, 70s, 80s, like to me, y'all are the original rebels. For real. Like if I'm thinking about like the rebels of like that I've grown up with, I look back at my mom like, yo, my mom was rebellious. Like my mom was a G. And then when she came into raising me, there was so much still of that fear, partially because of what she experienced herself. And also just like still, we take these things from our parents. They just end up being parts of us. And so like still that, all this stuff that she never resolved, all this stuff that my father never resolved, of his father never wanting anything to do with him. Right. I'm like, why you ain't fight harder to be in my life? I'm your firstborn. And so I think about that generationally, how I feel like the cycle breaker of my family. I'm the only one that kind of holds these two kind of like these lineages. I don't have any like direct siblings. I have half siblings with my father, but I think that would be it. Of like, please, heal yourselves. Heal yourselves.
I'll take that. We must read so many of the same things. The quote that you read earlier is one that I just read last week, and that's amazing.
Wow! Really? Wow.
Mm-hmm. The inheritance, the things that they don't resolve. Yeah, we inherit the things that our ancestors didn't resolve. My mother and my father loved me intensely. And I love them intensely. And if I were to analyze our relationship, I would notice a couple of things. My father is a heroic individual in my mind because of what he overcame and what he gave, and of himself, what he sacrificed in order for me to be here. There is something about our relationship that is interesting to note. I noticed a few years ago that when my father says he loves me, he does say that. He's an advanced, and he says it, specifically, and I cherish it. But he also says a lot, be careful, when he parts company with me. He'll say, be careful, just, off the cuff. And I thought about it because, you're in our business, you're supposed to analyze everything. I've analyzed what that means. I don't know what that means. I think it's an echo from a different time, an echo of a realization, an understanding of that the world was not safe for little Black boys. Right. And so he makes sure to say it. He says it almost every time we say goodbye. He'll drop that. Okay, I love you. Be careful. And if I had anything to shout back in the universe, be careful. I take that phrase, be careful, with care, be intentional, stay aware. of where you are. You cannot survive as a Black person or queer person or Black queer person or not if you are oblivious, if you are not, right? We don't have that benefit. That's been said many times before, right? We don't have the benefit to not notice what is happening. It will get us in the end if we don't. We will go down one avenue or the other. The culture will consume us. The culture will disappoint us. The culture will trick us. The society will crush us. Be careful.
I'm gonna hold that. I'm gonna hold that close, because I think there are many moments in the work where I cross that threshold, and I have to be very cognizant of my reactions. And I'm a very outspoken person, and yet, can be out in the street looking how I do, and I'll have, a man approach me and threaten to inflict harm for no reason. And my immediate, I've had so many reactive responses where my girlfriend has literally had to stop me and say the same thing. Like, you have to be more careful. And in my head, I'm not thinking about who I am. I'm just like, nah, I don't tolerate this. And yet there are many moments where I have to be quiet, which is painful, to feel like you can't stick up for yourself. But if I really want to be able, at minimum, to survive, I'm holding that
without fear, I think. I guess that is implied in the message that is delivered to me, and that I would share. Fear, fear is don't be moved by the spirit of fear. Don't let it tell you what to do. I don't know who I'm talking to. I'm talking to myself. Don't be afraid, because I'm often afraid. I'm often afraid. Fear not. Yes. I'm often afraid. Fear informs many of my decisions.
Yeah.
Fear has, right, my response to fear. But I'll take care, be careful, use care in everything that you do, be intentional in what you do. Every moment, every thought, every word. I wish I could live that way. I try to live that way. But I don't want to live in fear.
Oh, this is a good segue, this show and tell.
Show and tell.
Yes.
I don't know what we're showing.
The pictures.
Can they see it? Well, that's me. Which one is me? The little one.
It's the little one. I can't see. They have to move.
You can't see me because it's covered up by the banner here, but that's my brother Douglas. Yeah, that's my brother behind. He is my protector. He has protected me all my life, and been a great brother to me. I less so to him, I think. He's a higher being. And the little one at the bottom, that's me. I don't know where this picture was taken.
Your eyes. There's so much in those eyes.
The tell part is I gave this picture. They asked me for a picture that had me in action that related to the topic. And this is me, right before I entered the system, and, kindergarten and beyond. And one thing that I've always been thinking about in terms of Black liberation is that nobody who doesn't love Black babies, right, who doesn't know what they smell like and feel like, right, who hasn't held one, should be in charge of them for any amount of time. So all the teachers in those classrooms, and any classroom that we are in, should have a visceral understanding of Black people if they're teaching Black people, all the way to avoid things that have happened to me and that I've seen perpetrated on children, like basic stuff like putting on lotion in this room is personal grooming, and we don't do that in here. That's inappropriate. Give me that, blah, blah, blah. Let me shut that down. I'm sorry, but my mother told me, like, if you have ashy legs, you're supposed to put on lotion. And so I don't know why my mother is not right in this context. Is a form of violence, and it's disconcerting, and it turns us into it's a moment of a small little imprisonment for a child when the things that your family and your culture have taught you are the right way to go are confronted by an outside culture, a dominant culture that tells you, oh, no, That's ridiculous. And so I put this picture in because this is me at my most vulnerable when I was a child. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about babies. And I was once a baby. Everybody was once a baby.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's
Thanks for listening.
Literally how it's those are I feel like you're in my brain, Michael. Some of the things that you're saying, like, for real. I'm like, okay, I need Michael's birth chart after this. That's how I keep feeling. I'm like, I need your birth chart. This is
That's
me
fun.
when I had hair. I'm on the right. So this is a few years ago when I was in the classroom. And this was one of my children, a little Black girl. I taught kindergarten in Harlem for 4 years before I left to heal. That's why I left. And so we were doing something. We were having a conversation. It might have been like morning meeting or something. And this little girl, I'll call her T, she made a statement about her hair. And she basically said that, like, she was ugly because of her hair, and that she hated her hair and she hated the way it looks. Now, this is a child who was pretty, like, soft-spoken, like, would speak up often, but just, like, really just in her own little world, just, very quiet, often participated, but just, like, in that way where, like, she's good, right? So to hear her speak and say that was really painful. And my kids, we have been doing a lot of this, like, really affirmative work. We recited our affirmations every day. And I remember us all having a conversation about this, about her hair. And her hair, of course, we say all these things like, your hair is beautiful, and this and that. And words can only do so much, right? Words can only do so much. Like, you can tell me all these wonderful things that you think about me, and all of that is going in one ear, out the other, and I'm just going to internalize all of the bad shit that I heard, and that's going to hurt me, right? We talk about scars, right? And so I thought to myself, how can we build upon this? Because too often in classrooms, another form of violence is that people let stuff like this slide all the time. When children have internalized, this type of oppression, this type of anti-Blackness, and they have actively learned to hate themselves, so many people, right, allow that to just keep going. They want our kids to hate themselves. Why would I stop it and have a conversation? And so, we have this conversation, and when it was nap time, I went to the bathroom, and I had a lot of hair. It was out, and I just twisted my hair just like hers. So when I came back in, we came back together, and my kids were snickering. They were like, oh my God, right? And they were real hype, and they were like, oh my goodness. I'm like, what? What do you notice? What's happening? This is wild. They were like, at the time I went by Miss. So they were like, Miss Akiea, your hair, you and T's hair, it looks the same. And she smiled, and she rarely it's very shy smiles, but she smiled. She was hype. Shyly, very shyly, but super hype. And so, we did this, and, we read Bell Hooks' Happy to be Nappy. And, we has had this whole conversation about hair. And what this ended up turning into was we had this exhibit. I was an instructional coach of inquiry-based learning at my school. So one of our culminating projects was a gallery of heroes. I created this unit called Everyday Heroes versus Superheroes through the lens of Black history and resistance. And so what we did, one of our exhibits was an exhibit called I Love My Hair, Don't Touch My Hair. And so we listened to Solange because they do that song. And we had just gone to Studio Museum and learned about making mixed media art. So they had made these mixed media collages. And so what we did was kids just made mixed media portraits that, primarily focused on their hair using various materials. And so we took this and we ran with it. And we turned what could have been this really self-deprecating moment. And we sparked so much joy from it and so much resistance right against it by this really intentional reclamation of, wait, hold on a second, we gonna talk about this. Look at my, and that's, all of these moments for me, I feel like, are what liberation looks like in the classroom, is being able to speak to even the toughest moments where, even if you don't know the answer, part of liberation is being like, I don't know, let's figure it out, right? To kids, with kids, kids having agency in this. And, I asked her, is it okay that my hair looks like yours? Right? Like, is that okay? And so we did that, and we did that exploration. And so I really love this picture. It was from maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. I love this class in particular. So
I love it for so many reasons. Thank you for sharing that story with me, relating that, explaining that. I mean, I love the idea that identity understanding from a personal experience, the relationship, Black people in their relationship to hair, for instance. It's just interesting to me that is rarely, if ever, I haven't read all the job descriptions, right? But like in the field, in the education, cultural competency is listed as something that you should have. But like there are, it should be a deal breaker. If you're dealing with predominantly Black and brown children, there should be some, I don't know if there's a way to measure I'm not sure that there are, and you'll know more about the system, but like, how are we measuring cultural competency? Can you get demoted, or can your career be affected if you're not culturally competent? I'm pretty sure it can't. Well, it couldn't. In none of the experiences that I have, has that ever been like a marker where you're like, this person is responsible for 25, 35 Black and brown children in this moment. They have no business dealing with these with these young people, because they don't even understand how to comfort them. Right? They don't even understand how to comfort them.
At all. Ooh, personal questions. Ooh, that was deep. We can't even sit with these responses. I'm gonna be sitting with this all night. Okay, personal questions. Ooh, okay. I'm stressed. Oh, okay, I'm gonna read it to you. I was reading that I saw that you were really, love James Baldwin.
I have lived on 2 streets that he lived on. Very close, very nearby.
That is incredible. So if you could go on an excursion with James Baldwin, any excursion, what would it be, and what would you do? And if you were to, have conversation on this excursion, what could you imagine talking about?
I would go to the south of France, where he lived for a time, to his little villa. I would coast in. Miles Davis would be there, and maybe some other people, have come and gone, other kinds of folks. Maybe Eartha Kitt would be around. Lorraine Hansberry, right? Or Nina Simone, one of my favorites. And I would sit and shoot the breeze with Jimmy and talk about art. And later in the night, after we had a few too many glasses of wine, we would sit, and maybe we would get into some deep philosophical argument about love, and how his theories on love, and how it is a battle, and you have to commit to it no matter what. And I would talk to James about how hard that is for me, because I'm full of anger. And what do I do with that? And he was, and that's what we would talk about. And we talk about all his books. And we talk about science fiction. At the end, I say, Jimmy, could you write a science fiction novel for us? Because I would like Black people to exist in the future. And I think maybe we have to manifest it.
I love that. That is a freedom dream, if I ever heard one.
Right on. Freedom dream.
Thank you for sharing that. Ooh.
Key. May I call you Key?
Yes.
Okay. What is the source of our strength?
Honestly, I feel like I can answer this question and it's a layered question in multiple ways. I am a Scorpio through and through. And so I think that my first response would be that the source of our strength is in our pain, but not in a way where pain is like the kind of overarching element of our lives. Because for me, I find that, you know, every couple of months I'm cycling, and I experience these really transformative deaths often, and I think that's part of, you know, also, you know, committing to abolition. I think about that, you know, that in order to be able to create something, has to be destroyed, right? There's these balances that exist. And I think, you know, on my chest, I literally have a tattoo that I got when I was like maybe 19. I haven't gotten the tattoo in 10 years, but I only get them when there's something really significant in my life. And I have 8 or 9 of them that I got within a few years. I have a phoenix on my back. So that should speak to like really this idea of understanding that, again, what you mentioned before, that suffering is a part of life. It's not the only part of life. But because I feel so intensely and I allow myself to feel. And so I think that's what I mean by pain, is allowing ourselves to feel this like full spectrum of emotions. Like you said, you were angry. Well, feel it and feel it deeply, and don't let anybody snatch that from you. Allowing ourselves to really be in our emotions is really healing, because it gives me space to like release that. And so on my chest, this is like passion turns to pain. And it's just like anything I'm passionate about, it's going to hurt me, right? It's going to hurt me. And I've accepted that. And so I don't see pain as a bad thing. When, you know, people pathologize often, like, you know, depression and you're sad and all these things, I'm like, yo, it's weird. Like, I feel like that's pathological. To sit here and tell somebody who's like sad because the world is the way that it is and because of these experiences that I've had, like now you're pathologizing me because I actually feel it, because I haven't dissociated yet from this, you know, and I dissociate when I need to, right? Like I'm going to escape. But I think this idea of like, you know, pain and joy, because I think we are able to experience the full range of joy whenever we've had these other experiences. So I feel like my scars, for me in particular, and my scars are not just my own, they're ancestral in so many ways. So I feel like the source of my strength is not only, you know, our strength in general is not only our ancestors lifting us, holding us, just literally feeling them inside of us, even when that energy is like, yo, we have to release you. It's all part of this greater strength that I think allows us to move in the world, when we've learned to accept that, okay, these are all parts of ourselves. This darkness, right, is not bad. And we've internalized this idea of dark bad. It's not, right? I find so much light. I find so much of myself by going through these really transformative processes. And I think that once we can understand that we are not our circumstances, and that but we have them, and we should own them, and we should own our experiences, and we have to own our bloodlines, and we have to heal through that. But that pain gives way to so much else. And so our scars shouldn't be, you know, looked down upon. Like, you know, I'll be real transparent, show mine proudly. And I think that's so much of where everything else births from.
Right on.
Ooh, last words.
Did we solve the problem of Black liberation in the classroom? I'm not sure.
Ongoing.
So I acknowledge it's an ongoing struggle. Struggle is real. I think my theory is that we are free. And we are free by recognizing that it's all a great wheel. Everything toggles back between good things and bad things, between fame and, like, you know, a hit to your reputation, from like, having nothing to having everything, blah, blah, back and forth. And the way through is equanimity. And so we will be free when we raise children with equanimity, when we decide as a people that we are in this world, but not confined by it, not of it. We can make change in this world, but that doesn't mean we can't be happy and fully fulfilled, because the world is messed up, will always be messed up. After this struggle, there will be another one. There's always another one. But in the meantime, I accept that our resilience comes from our pain. I'm with you. We got a lot of experience with that, and moving forward in spite of that, joyfully, is what that's what we can do. That's how we can achieve liberation.
Thank you. Yeah, I think my last words would be aligned with that, and to say that, like, we, Black people, Black trans people, Black queer people, literally Black gender expansive people, we are the dream. We have to remember that. We just in our own bodies, showing up as our fullest selves, holding space for one another, taking care of one another. When you think abolition, you gotta go to Black trans folks. Where else? Who else? Than to look at Black trans folks and to understand that, like, our lives not only matter, but we also deserve. So we deserve to thrive. We deserve to exist in the expanse, and that's why I love to escape in the future. And I think that taking that, one thing we're so good at is innovating and creating, right? And I would just continue to encourage folks, in this path of liberation, like, be inquisitive and question everything, and continue to resist. And I just want to extend gratitude to you, Michael, because this has been such a healing conversation for me, and I hope we stay connected after this. I would love to stay connected with you after this. Like, I feel like we got a bond. So
well, we've got all these people in common, so I can't imagine that I won't see you again soon.
Yes.
And this has been delightful for me.
Yes. Thank you for having us. We appreciate all y'all.